In the Oklahoman newsroom, this is an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Kyle Fredrickson. Kyle, obviously a big weekend for the Cowboys and their bowl destination. That Texas-Baylor game turns in favor of the Longhorns, and that means OSU is headed to the Sugar Bowl to face Ole Miss. And obviously a rematch of a bowl of years past. These two teams met in the Cotton Bowl, but really a lot has changed since then, especially when it comes to Ole Miss, and they've really gotten in on some high-profile recruits for sure.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze has done a very good job since he got that job just a few years ago, putting together some pretty impressive recruiting classes. And I think when we look at these two teams, there's a lot of similarities we can draw. They both have a marquee victory. The Cowboys beat TCU, Ole Miss beat Alabama. They both have offenses that can score 40 points a game, and defenses with stars on the defensive line, being Robert Kimdichie at Ole Miss and then Emmanuel Ogbah at OSU. But the composure of these teams is kind of blue chip versus blue collar, I think, in a lot of ways. Mike Gundy is a guy who's always, been steadfast in saying that, this is a OSU team over the years that's been composed of three-star guys, a lot of under-the-radar players. As to where back in 2013, this Ole Miss recruiting class was ranked 7th in the country with a number of five-star guys at different positions. So it's interesting to see how those two strategies have kind of unfolded. Both of these programs vaulting themselves into the national conversation this season in different ways, but certainly an exciting matchup, and the Cowboys got to thank Charlie Strong and the Longhorns for punching their ticket, and which was a pretty unexpected upset. Definitely
so. You talk about big-time recruits, and kind of another example of that is the quarterback. I mean, you talk about Mason Rudolph, and he's a guy that was largely under the radar. He kind of burst onto the scene late in recruiting, but obviously sticks with his Oklahoma State commitment. But he's going to be central to how well this Oklahoma State team fares against Ole Miss. People will remember that matchup in that Cotton Bowl. Zach Robinson hurt. I mean, I think we can safely say that was pretty much ineffective against Ole Miss. Will the Cowboys be able to have Mason Rudolph and potentially be a lot more effective than we saw in that matchup a few years ago?
Well, Mike Gundy says that he expects them to be ready. He always, whenever he talks about injuries, he always steps back and say, well, hey, I'm not a doctor. I think on Monday he said I got a C in biology. It was his excuse. So he leaves the door open a little bit there, and some of this I think is gamesmanship on his part by keeping Ole Miss guessing in terms of who's going to go out there and play. But OSU better hope that Rudolph is ready, because they're facing a defense that could certainly take advantage of this OSU offense if they become one-dimensional without much of a run game. And when you have J.W. Walsh to come in there for those situational runs, it really just makes this entire offense flow better. So we've seen some pictures on social media of Rudolph since. He's in a walking boot, he's in crutches, but Gundy seemed optimistic. He talked about this being an injury in comparison to others who've had it being a little less severe. So that gives him some hope that this is a game that he'll be ready for.
We'll obviously be monitoring that once the Cowboys get back to practice, but last week off, this week finals, so it's going to be a minute before we get any more updates, but we'll have those once we hear. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.